I just want to let you know I've lost my voice. It's only the second day, so you have to hear from Emma more. Emma is my new bestie. She has taken over a role at Guy's and St Thomas's Foundation in London. They're two of the oldest hospitals in the UK. This endowment's 450 years old. So Emma's now transitioning all the assets that have been outsourced and manage them internally. So Emma, before we start, why don't you tell everyone about your background and how you got into investing?
Well, firstly, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for coming to listen. How did I get into investing? I left university, started at JP Morgan. With all due respect to JP Morgan, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so that's where I started. And very quickly learned about the buy side and moved, and I learned really a lot of what I know about investing from my time at Perry Capital. So I was lucky enough to work with Chris Hahn and Richard Perry and a whole host of other fantastic investors. And from then I moved to work at Wellcome Trust, which is the UK's largest endowment. And probably you haven't heard of Guy's and St Thomas's, then you'll have heard of Wellcome. And at that time, the endowment was under the management of Danny Trull, who was a genius, sadly, not with us anymore. But that's my brief background of why I got here.
And so when you got to Guy's and St Thomas's, you're given this mandate to insource all this capital. Tell us what you've inherited and what you're going to do with it.
So we have 1 billion. I know it's a very little number in the context of the US, but it is pounds and not dollars. We have a big chunk, 40% of that is land and property. The land around both hospitals in Lambeth and Southwark, so really close. One's opposite the Houses of Parliament, one's right next to London Bridge. So really central, but that's a big fixed part of my portfolio, can't do very much about immediately anyway. We've obviously got a collection of private equity holding. Well, obviously we do have a collection of private equity investments that we're inheriting, and we're learning and meeting the managers and going about understanding that portfolio. But we're rebuilding, rebuilding as a portfolio, understanding exactly why we have allocating to certain managers with the sort of rolling portfolio framework.
With this framework, are you going to do what I call a jigsaw puzzle, like a Yale endowment, or a treasure hunt, like an MIT model? How are you thinking about the frameworks for doing this and building it out?
So that's a really interesting question. So I think both is the answer. You need a structure. You need to understand, the way I'm approaching it is you really need to understand how you're going to put the capital that I have is going to work at its best to deliver returns over the long term, but also essentially liquidity. We're the only source of liquidity for everything, all the good work that the foundation does. And so we need to have cash at our disposal and feel safe that we are never going to be, well, hopefully feel safe that we won't be put under pressure to sell risk assets at the wrong time, which is, definitely, people always get scared when things feel at their worst. And I need to build the confidence and resilience in the portfolio and with the board of trustees that we can see through those times and, as I say, not make the wrong decision. So I think we need the framework. We need the sort of the jigsaw puzzle, I guess, outline. But we need to be dynamic. We need to understand that is a shifting framework. Iterative maybe is a better word. And then within that, the choices we make, there's always the treasure hunt, right? Yeah. It's not just like we are not big enough and we need to be concentrated, because over-diversification, which is something I inherited, is a surefire way to mean that you don't outperform anything. And so, you really do need to understand why you've allocated two managers, why you're picking certain people. So I would say it's a combination of the two.
What do you think about everything in this industry? Everyone talks about returns, but really it's about people, right?
Yeah.
So what are the qualities you look for in the managers that you hire?
So it's about people everywhere. I mean, it is like capital is fungible, and the people who are thoughtful about what economic growth that capital enables, it's not just about the numbers, it's how you generate the numbers. Like what is the footprint of the corporate activity that capital ultimately is backing? So we're trying to find, and I hate all of the acronyms and ESG, social responsibility, sustainable. Only the financial services industry, I think, could have taken such a good idea and completely messed it up in terms of execution. But we're trying to find non-cliched ways of the sort of concept of value alignment, and the fund managers themselves, and then ultimately then the investments they seek to make, how are they thinking about backing the teams who are doing their best to understand all of those externalities and where they can make improvements, whether that's with regard to the communities, society, environment, management of stakeholders, regulators, all of those. There's so many important parts of investing, right? And the world has moved on from just looking at a number in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
How are people thinking about doing the best they can do, whatever it is? So that's what we're trying to find a better way of articulating that value alignment, but that's the core of the thesis.
And then talk about governance in your investment committee.
So I inherited an investment committee who were strong, but used to sort of just being a very oversight role, just receiving updates from partners and sort of making sure that the boxes were ticked. I've created a subcommittee of that to be much more fluid. We can't be investing to sort of discrete 4 meetings a year. That's not going to work. And I've got some brilliant people. I've got Roy Swan, who is a part of the Ford Foundation over here. I've got David Bennett, who was one of the founders of Reddington, an ex-Mark Woolley at BlackRock. I've got some really, really strong individuals, and importantly, that I'm really lucky have got time to give me and are really responsive. So the investment committee I've managed to, hopefully, I think is proving to be working quite well. So then I've got to manage up to the board, and that is a much bigger entity, much more diverse in terms of stakeholders, much more touch points with the local councils, the hospitals, and that's a challenge because it's just a different world. They come from different backgrounds, and understanding investments and not being too scared about us owning the responsibility of investing. Somehow it's easier if you give it to someone else, even if they're doing a bad job. It just doesn't feel like it's on their shoulders. So we're just working to build the relationships.
So what are the biggest changes in this industry that you've seen that make your job harder?
Just information, so much information, so much noise. Now, in this, instantaneous noise. And I think whilst access to information is everything, there is definitely the overwhelm and too much. And I think doing this job well, doing probably most jobs well, is just distilling down, sort of thoughtfully distilling down to the key value drivers or the key factors that really are the important, that they're influencing the outcomes. And I think that the constant always on is really hard.
What new skills have you had to learn?
To talk NHS and government. I think trying to build process and consistency, and whilst preserving an adaptable, flexible, sort of being open to new ideas without being lost, so your head is always just spinning and not knowing which way you're pointing. So I think there's a sort of, you've got to know where your North Star is, but you can't just be blinkered in delivering that. So that, just that sort of finding the exact right attachment point to being structured and open-minded.
How much are you influenced by other people? Because you're a foundation. Are you a Lomo or a Fomo?
Me personally, or the sort of
both. Are you managing it?
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, it's a very different. We were talking about this earlier. Yeah. It's a very different landscape to being over in the US. I mean, we're a very small little group of foundations in the UK, and not many have their internal investment teams. So that's a privileged position to be, because we are different. We had that long-term horizon, which is just gold dust in terms of, as an investor and allocator, oh, shouldn't do that, sorry. In terms of being able to make decisions, really generate, I have this concept in my head of returns on time. I mean, if you're not managing to a quarter, that is just heaven, having been in a position where we were doing that. So I think it's easier in the UK to stand alone. I'd like to think that I'm a bit more Lomo. I think
That's love of missing out, by the way, those of you who don't know.
I think it's hard to build confidence with the governance structures around you, though. If you're without, you've got to recognise what everyone else is doing and acknowledge it. And just standing there in the corner with your sort of fingers in yours, going, I'm going to do it my way. Yeah. That's not where you need to take people with you. So yeah, hopefully the right mix of both.
Do you think talent shrinkage is a real issue, or is it a perception?
I think it's a perception. I think you can always find talent. I think it's just harder to. I think you just have to be more. It's not such a. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate at all. I think looking for talent in them where it used to be more obvious sources, or sort of, did you always hire from a consultant or always hire from investment banks? I mean, I don't think this. The world is a big place. People have many avenues to take, many paths to take. So I think you've just got to, the needle in the haystack is more of a reality now than I think it was. It's not like all the bright people go to 2 universities and then all go to an investment bank. That doesn't happen. And in fact, probably completely, if you had to pick one end of that spectrum, it would be the opposite end. So I think you just have to work hard. But you can still find the talent.
What about manager talent? How do you feel about that today? And would you look at small and emerging managers? Yes,
is the definite. I mean, we're lucky in the sense that that people don't get fired for hiring X is a real thing, right? And particularly in big institutions, you say, well, I've got to write checks for a couple of $100 million. Where am I going to put it? I'm going to put it with these sort of the really big established funds. I don't have to do that. I'm smaller. We're smaller. We can write smaller checks, and therefore, it's definitely worth the time seeking out sort of more up and coming managers. That's a terrible expression. Anyone who's a manager and stands on their own 2 feet is not up and coming, because they wouldn't be able to raise any money. But if you look at any fund, that the IRRs in the first 3 to 5 years of their life tend to be the bedrock of these fantastic track records. And whilst people can do just fine with bigger sums of money, the reality is the bigger you get, the harder. It is just harder at scale. And so we're trying our best to really look, go that extra mile to find people who are not in the top obvious funds that are presented to you by the world.
There's a lot of your portfolio blue chip managers, right? I thought so. How do you think about portfolio construction and actually sourcing the ideas? Where do you get the ideas from?
So that's that's sort of the challenge back to me from the investment committee is sort of, so where are you going to go? We're a small team. We don't have a lot of people, and there's
How many are on the team?
So we've got the property team. There's about 6 people internally, and we have different people helping us, advisors there. We've got 5 of us that we've hired on the investment side, and we talk to people. I mean, I think you've got to keep talking. It's word of mouth. It comes back to being people. It's always people, and I'm lucky enough. I'm really quite old now, and I've been around for a while, and I know lots of wonderful people like Rahul and others, and good people know good people, and I think it is a virtuous circle. So you can't be in a rush, and I think that finding the right people, particularly in private equity. I mean, these relationships that we're in with private equity, they last twice the length of an average marriage. I mean, it is a long time that you're with these people. I'm not joking. Like, the average marriage
and you can't get out, right?
This is my point. Yeah. I mean, it's like 8 years you're married to someone on average, apparently, according to the internet. I mean, we've got 15 years plus and counting on that side. So you've really got to know who these people are. With them, when you've got more liquidity, whilst I would like to think we would always keep a high bar in who we choose, like you can afford to you can change things around. With privates, you just can't, and you've just got to take your time to know people.
Can you share some of the questions that you ask people when you first meet them in terms of managers?
I think so. It's about the North Star, and I think it's like, so what would whoever the manager is, what would if you gave me sort of, this is. Describe your perfect investment, if it could walk in the door, what would it look like to you? Tell me what the outcome was and why the outcome was the right outcome for your fund. As in, it doesn't just matter to me that you doubled the money or gave me the 10+% IRR, net, by the way, not gross, and we talk about pet peeves. but also that, how did you do it? Like, what was your USP? What do you believe that your is you as a manager, you bring something to the table that is unique and defined by you and the team that you've built in your process. Like what about this investment enabled you to showcase those skills to the very best of your ability? And that's what I try, like that's when we try and get that sense of who these people are and how they really think about, like, oh, we just got lucky and, you know, commodity markets moved in our favor. And so fine, great, like everyone, we all need luck. But it's like, what do you really turn up every day to do? Why do you, because that's when you know that people will not be, they won't have the FOMO. And that's the problem. We need to the best of our ability know what these managers are going to do so we can have a sense when we step back to risk manage their portfolio. And if people are always just chasing their tails or trying to find the next best way to like put money in the ground so they can make money, they won't have the courage of their convictions to stick at things when life gets tough, and it will get tough.
Who'd you look up to?
Oh God, so many people.
Anyone that we would know?
So I mean, I mentioned him before, but I mean, I learned so much from Danny. I mean, he was a genius. He was difficult, but I guess that's probably a defining characteristic of a lot of geniuses. I think the world of him. There's another brilliant, do you know Ian McKnight? I don't know if, he's extraordinary, exceptional. He used to run the Royal Mail pension funds, nothing to do with Royal Mail. He just, people who can take that framing of jigsaw puzzle versus treasure hunt and put their own stamp on it. So there's structure, and they can really clearly explain what it is they're doing, but they're thinking all the time about, from first principles, like the world is changing around us. Actually, you know what? I can offset my liabilities over here, and I can give myself a sandpit to play in over here. Or Danny used to have that concept of, he wanted a bit of sex and violence, is what he used to call it. Sorry, apologies. But, you know, I need my blue chip, because he was big, but then I just can't, I just need to have those, like, long-term options. But, you know, it's such an amazing role in terms of being able to meet so many people, learn from so many people. People who are kind, I look up to as a generic statement. It really matters to me to be kind and polite.
Tell us what your superpower is.
Oh, God, I don't know.
But what superpower do you need to do this job?
So I think that point of distilling information. I think the people I've worked with who I admire the most have got, you can give them a 1,000-page report or a model with millions of lines, and they'll be like, okay, those two numbers, like, where did they come from? Why do you understand them? Or, you know, go to page 503 of the 1,000-page report. That's what matters. Like, really being able to sort of have that superhuman strength to just like hear a lot of information and latch on to the, you know, the key value driver. That's important. I think in other words, just the other superpower I think is that really understanding different people's perspective, like what matters to them. And that's what I'm learning about my board is, you know, when you work for the NHS or you work for government, they're so like what they have to solve for to keep their jobs or to progress or whatever they, you know, what do they need to be managing for? And that isn't what I'm managing for. And just really understanding that is a big part of my learning in this role.
What skill do you think you'll need in the future that you don't have now?
Being able to say no.
You take every meeting.
I can't, no, exactly.
Does your team?
We're taking too many right now.
Right.
And I think there's that part.
Can you quantify that in numbers? How many a week do you think managers you meet?
Gosh, double digits. I mean, which is a lot. I mean, we're 5 of us, and we also are trying, like, there's the whole sort of, we've got to figure out what, I mean, we don't know what we don't know in terms of taking this, you know, unpicking the portfolio and, you know, rebuilding processes internally ourselves. I think the being able to say no whilst, as I said, that balance of rigidity and open-mindedness, like, but we can't meet good people unless we put ourselves out there and take some meetings. So I think what I'm trying to help our team, or try and help myself as well, is be really clear what it is we're looking for at that moment in time. Like, I mean, we just do have to say we can't meet all public, all private, all debt, all equity, all at the same time. That's just really challenging. And so to try and just direct, so we're doing a big project on private, we're doing a lot in credit right now. We did private credit, we didn't have any. I think it's really exciting. You get your money back as well. You can generate income, and there's a wide open goal in terms of, you know, the traditional bank lending market, and it's just ever and ever sort of reduced in terms of the effectiveness with which it really funds growth. So we're trying to like keep our ears a little bit closed to other sectors right now, just to help ourselves a bit.
Can you tell us an amusing story about how a manager tried to get your attention?
You said this. Did he ask me this question? I said, I don't know if I have.
Really?
I think that there's
some of them will create them here then.
There's a real persistence. I think I have more amusing stories on sort of more the advisor side, where it's just sort of, it genuinely is you sort of say, can you just read back what you've written to me? It doesn't make any sense. Like, this fund manager really generates alpha. And you just like look at the summary of the numbers, and you're like, no, it doesn't. Like, I don't know what. And it's generally, I think, honestly, it's a cut and paste. I think that's the opening 2 sentences of every email. You should look at this manager because, and you're like, they haven't given any money back. The IRR is subpar. The loss rate's like, have you read your email? And there are often emails where they've obviously, in theory, that the sort of program's supposed to change the name of the person at the top, and it doesn't. And you're like, yes, and you're like, okay.
Give us some of the names you've been called.
Completely random.
Yeah.
Or, sometimes it's Ethan, Edward, and you're like, did you just get E and just pick some sort of odd name? So then I do have a policy not to reply to those, because otherwise I'd be a bit mean, I think. Just say, like, if you're going to write to me, please, can you get my name right?
I think you've almost answered the last question, which is what your pet peeve is. So what is your motto? Let's end with what your motto is.
Oh my God, are we ending this? So it is to learn and make my world bigger. That's what I care about. Apparently I've said it enough. So I wouldn't have said it was a motto, but we had a Christmas quiz at work, and apparently I've said that so much to my team that was one of the quiz questions, which is what's Emma's motto, and that was the answer. So apparently I do repeat myself on that. I think we just have to always be open to learning. It's really exciting to learn. And make your world bigger. But as you say, yeah, that's what I care about.
Right. Thank you, Emma, so much.
No, thank you, Rahul.
Everyone.
Thank you.